In this video, we're going to give you the 6 key things that you have to make sure you get done before you can start any structural work in your house. We'll break it down for you and we'll tell you what we paid for it, what suppliers we used, and how we got it done really. Guys, welcome to our YouTube channel. I'm Mel.
I'm Sean.
And we are the Dice Fam. First, we're going to take you through getting the design ready for our floor plans, planning permission, party wall agreements, getting technical drawings together, finding a structural engineer, and also getting building control sorted. And we'll tell you what all those things mean because when we started we had literally no idea. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up and let's get into it.
So as many of you know, we embarked on this journey at the beginning of the year. To recap, the property was owned by my dad and my aunt. We needed to begin the process to buy them out and for us to own the property. At the same time, we needed to understand and learn what we needed to do in order to begin the work.
So while Sean did the conveyancing and sorting out all the legal stuff and all that legal mumbo jumbo, I basically got onto getting the floor plans and the design and everything ready so that we could actually start the home renovation work as soon as we owned the property. And so we actually started looking into what was required back in February, and we thought it was going to be a breeze, right? We're like, oh yeah, we just get, these drawings done and we're not doing anything too crazy, so that'll be quick and we'll have everything sorted within 6 weeks. How naive were we? Literally, we started in February when we kind of met the architects and stuff, and we didn't have everything done until June, right? So that took 4 months to get everything done. And actually, coronavirus did play a bit of a part, but actually it didn't really have much impact because most of the stuff that we did, we could do remotely, and we did the things that had to be done on site, we actually did that early on. So it was unbelievable how long it actually took. So if you guys are planning some big works, then make sure you have enough time and you factor that in as well. So when we talk about structural works in this video, we're just going to bring up something on screen here where you can see what kind of things are structural works. So for example, taking out important walls and doing loft conversions, extensions, all that stuff, it is basically structural work. Obviously, if you're doing something like putting a new bathroom cabinets or kitchen cabinets in, that stuff isn't structural work, so you wouldn't necessarily need to go through all the steps that we'll outline today, but you might want to do some of them to help you with the design and the kind of architecture about what you're doing. So the first thing that we did was back in February, we went out to find an architect, and actually we didn't even know that an architect was actually the most important thing to do at the beginning. So we started looking for builders. And so we went on to websites, we went and spoke to our family and friends about builders that they knew. And when we were speaking to the builder and they were coming around and having a really early look at the property, they basically said, you need to get an architect and it's got to be ASAP basically. So we found about 4 architects and we got 4 quotes from them. 2 of them, I think, were your contacts from people you knew. And then another one we got from one of the builders that we were speaking to at that time. And the last one that we got from, actually, I think it was Trust a Trader website. And the last one we got from Trust a Trader's website. And we actually got quotes from all 4 of them, and it ranged from about £2,500 to £5,000 for all the different quotes, which was a bit crazy. I was quite confused as to how it can be so different. And in the end, we chose Detailed Planning, who we found off the Trust a Trader website. They had fantastic reviews from everyone they worked with, and they knew the area, they knew Barnet, and they knew how the planning permission process works in Barnet, and they did everything for us. So we were really happy to go with them, and I think we had the confidence that they knew what they were doing and they could talk us through the process.
The architect that we went for, Detailed Planning, wasn't one of the 2 contacts that I went to get a quote from. And they actually, Detailed Planning turned out to be a little bit more expensive than the 2 contacts that I got a quote from. But the most important thing for me throughout this whole process in picking an architect and in picking a builder, the key point that I had to think about, or we had to think about, was, can we work with them? Is it a case that, we'll use a recommendation from the family or whatever, but then they will cause us some issues down the line? If that was the case and I didn't want to go with them, I'd rather pay a little bit more to get the job done right and for us to be able to work with them. And the second piece of advice that we can give you is, if you are going to undertake some structural work and you ask a builder, every builder will have the preferred architect, and by all means go get a quote from that architect, but that does not mean you're bound to use that architect. You can find your own one, do your research, get different quotes, and make a decision that works for you.
Yeah, and I think that the architect that we chose was actually perfect for us, because not only were we first time buyers, we were obviously first time home renovation people. So they really walked us through all the steps of what we need to know. They dealt with us mostly remotely, other than obviously needing to go on site and do measurements. And even during the whole coronavirus crisis and everything going on, it didn't stop us from getting what we need to do, because we could have Zoom calls with them. So when we started that back in February, first thing that we had to do with the architect was get the design. So they came in, they measured the entire house, and then they came up with a proposed what would it look like with some of the changes that we had suggested with the loft and with changing the walls. And we then had to spend, the next couple of weeks basically figuring out with them what the layout and the design would be of the new property.
So they didn't have a blank slate. About a month before they actually came in to do the drawings, Mel had her own drawings. She had gone throughout the entire house with a measuring tape and effectively put circles in for the toilet and then squares in for the bathtub and all these different appliances. And it was funny because every time we would go to the house to see my dad, he would always take the mick by saying, "Oh, are you redrawing the plans again?"
I basically was, though. I think I came up with like 10 different scenarios for all the major rooms. But I guess it's how your mind works, isn't it? I'm a very visual learner, so I wanted to be able to see what it would look like and see the different options. And it did take a little bit of a while. I think probably our own fault. We took a bit of a while because we kept changing our minds. We kept changing our minds about the layout. That took a bit of a while. So I think in the end, we got to a place where we were happy with the plans around about middle of March time. In our fee with the architect, they would submit the planning permission for us. So some architects will do it and some architects won't. We found one obviously that would do it for us and just make our lives a bit easier. And the planning application was for Barnet Council. It costed us £131 for one application, and we ended up doing two because we were a bit worried about lockdown and delaying getting acceptance for what we were doing. So we had an outbuilding as well as a loft conversion that we wanted to do. So we put two separate applications. I mean, to be honest, in the end, we didn't really need to put two applications in. They both came back really quickly. And so I probably just wouldn't do that again. So we lodged the application for planning permission in April, and then we got approval in May. So it took about 4 to 5 weeks, which is not too bad actually, to get our application. And while we were doing that, we were speaking to the architects and trying to arrange the next step, which was the party wall.
We had no idea what a party wall agreement was. We had absolutely no idea what it entailed. And it took us a few calls with our architect and different party wall assessors to actually understand what it is we need. We learned very quickly that it's a legal requirement to have in place before any work begins. So, well, I guess that was something that we just needed to do. So the reason why the party wall is so important, particularly for us and before we begin our structural work, is because we're a terraced house. So we have two neighbours either side of us. So the party wall is anything that affects our wall and the neighbours. And because of the extensive work that we're doing, so taking down the chimney breast, putting the steel beams in the loft, it's very invasive work, which means that it is very likely that the neighbours' walls could be affected. So for us to have an agreement in place, one, is not only legal, but it's also important because it allows us to make sure what our responsibilities are to our neighbours, and likewise what our neighbours can expect from us if anything was to go wrong. So our architect recommended his own party wall surveyor, and we did our own research to find out other party wall surveyors and any other recommendations that we could have. So the quotes that we were getting back ranged between writing up the notices to actually serve notice. So before any work can be done, notice has to be served on both the neighbours 2 months before the start of the work. The second is putting together a schedule of conditions. So that's when the surveyor will come around, take pictures of our walls, the current state of conditions of our neighbours' walls, which allows us to be able to check if anything goes wrong with our neighbours' walls and compare it to the pictures before the work began. And the third option for the quote was the party wall agreement. So after the schedule of conditions, they write an agreement as to what our responsibilities are, and we'll pay reasonable costs to return the walls to how they were prior to the work beginning. Roughly speaking, the quotes were coming up to about £1,200, and
that was per neighbour, by the way.
Because we have two neighbours, the burden was upon us to pay that cost. So I went onto the government website, and actually the government website is really useful with regard to the party wall agreements. It tells you step by step what you need to do. So I thought, actually, let's not pay for the party wall surveyor. I'm just going to use the documents and the steps that the government website outlines, and I just followed it. So I filled out the documents, I served notice, and thankfully, because we have really good neighbours, and this only really works if you've got good neighbours, and because we do, I told them that this was going to happen. I served the notices. Within 7 days, they responded and they accepted the agreement. For our own peace of mind, we then went into each of the properties to take pictures of the walls. So again, it was good for us and also for our neighbours to understand what the state of the conditions of the walls were. So if there were going to be any issues, we would know and would be able to cross-reference.
I think it's also worth remembering that these are your neighbours. At the end of the day, you're going to live next to them and live next door to them for however long you live there. So yes, we can put an agreement in and we can go and dispute, and that, sometimes people end up going to court and doing all that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, if we're doing some building work and our building work has had an impact on our neighbours' walls, if it was the other way around, we'd expect it to be repaired in the same way they would expect it to be repaired from us. And, at the end of the day, that's our responsibility, right? So for us, we didn't feel like we needed to go and get paid however many £1,000s to a party wall surveyor, because we knew that we would be willing to pay any reasonable costs from the damage that we've done. It's only fair and only right. So that was the third part of this process. Drop us some comments below about what you think, any challenges you've had so far in your process. And now we're going to move on to what we call the technical stage. So while the party wall stuff was going on, after we got planning permission approval, our architect then started working on the technical drawings, which basically were really complicated things like what fire safety measures do we need, like fire safety doors, what type of steel do we need, what's the structural implications of the work that we're doing. And so they started working on what they call the technical drawings. We then had to instruct a structural engineer who could do things like steel calculations and work out what the kind of quality and the width of the steel and all that sort of stuff was required to be able to support the building. So again, our architect's really helpful. They recommended us a structural engineer that they had used before. We ended up, of course, getting just a few other quotes as well and comparing the differences, and also looking at the reviews online from other people. And in the end, we found a structural engineer who was based in London, such that they could come on site a bit more easily if we needed to. And again, they had good reviews online, and they also charged a reasonable amount. So we used a company called Structures Made Easy. They charged us about £1,450 to come out and do an on-site visit, have a look at everything, and then make the amendments to our drawings about the structure and the kind of structural requirements. And that all managed to happen quite quickly as well, so we were pretty pleased with that. So the last thing that we had to do was sort out building control and get building control to review our technical drawings. And so they basically just check that the drawings that you have are up to the standards of the current building regulations. And so we had two options. We could either go privately and find a company, or we could use the council's building control also. And building control is important because it's not just reviewing the drawings. They then come on site after the work has begun and they start to inspect, particular areas that might cause some concern. So we got a few different quotes. They all ranged from about £1,000 to £2,000. And we ended up choosing the council. It wasn't our builder's kind of preferred option, if I'm honest, but we chose the council just because we wanted someone who was local, but also we wanted that assurance from the council because they would know about the building regulations. So, they've been fine so far, really, and they've come when they were expected to come, so we haven't really had any problems. They've charged us around £460 to review the drawings, and then another £600 or so to come on site and do the inspections that they would. So in total, for everything that we've documented in these 6 steps in this video, we paid £5,658, which, is quite a lot of money actually, and we had no idea that we'd have to spend that much money. We had no idea that we'd planned for it. Luckily we had some contingency funds, available, so we were okay. But I would definitely say shop around and see what else is available. Don't just take the first quote that you're given, and make sure that you pick the right suppliers and vendors who will be able to help you on your journey of not only doing things but also understanding what you're doing. So guys, thanks so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this video and we hope it was informative. Drop us some comments below about what you think, any challenges you've had so far in your process, and if you've got any questions, we'll do our best to answer them or redirect you where we know. So give us a like if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.